Welcome to the Lighthouse with Elijah Lee. Today I'm very excited because we have a special guest on today. One some of you, most of you, perhaps all of you do not know. But that was my goal coming into this, and that's what I want to bring to the table is people you don't really know but might possibly in the future someday recognize their name and recognize who this person is. Uh but I can't wait. We're talking about a very important topic today, so stick around till the very end. Get all you need. You get physical food, but you're also going to get political food here. So get ready, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. So, today we have with us a man. I don't know if you're a man, but young man. He's not that old. He's still in his prime. His name is Josiah. And Josiah, he's been a friend of mine for a very long time. I've literally known him since I was born. I have known this guy since the era before I could speak. So, I'd say we're pretty reasonable friends. Never had too many fights, too many arguments, stuck it out. But he has been a great help to me in talking about this podcast, trying to work everything through, because he also has a great interest in not just the news, but also for America. He really wants to make sure that we're where we need to be as a country. And that was something I saw from him even as a younger boy. And I was like, that's something to me that now that's really important to me, because he set a precedent for me to care about that. And today, though, we're taking a little bit of a sidestep. Now, I don't know how much of the story I can really tell here, but he did, in fact, study out inflation, which is really interesting because it's not totally along the lines of what he's studying. He's looking at law, things like that, and instead, he takes this kind of sidestep, studies out inflation, and I was like, you know what, that's a great topic to talk about because it's probably not talked about enough. And nobody really understands, wait, why does inflation happen? What's bad about inflation? Is there any positive side to inflation? When did it start? What's going on? How can we decrease inflation? And so that's why we're here today, to kind of clear that up, make it a little simple, and hopefully get a ton of new people on board with the right way of handling money, not just in America, but around the world. How are you, Josiah? And tell us a little bit about yourself, your backstory.
Yeah, I'm doing really well. It's a weekend here, so I'm taking a break from college classes. I, finished my bachelor's degree in pre-law last year. I'm working on a criminal justice degree now. So my interest in this inflation topic came from my HI 300 economics class last semester. And, we have to write a pretty decently long paper about a certain topic. And so he gave us a lot of time to think about what we wanted to write about, what we're interested in. And I've always had this academic sort of intrigue with inflation because mathematically, there's a mathematical part of it that's intriguing, because you think, money's going up, but then there's more supply. So how does that actually balance out in the economy? And, I've always heard, oh, it's bad, it's bad. Well, I wanted to know, why is it bad? And like you said, is there anything good about it? And what causes it? So I took a dive on all of that, wrote a paper about it. So now I guess I'm not an expert, but I've done a little research, so maybe I can share some of my findings with you.
Right. Well, that's exactly what I want, because we're trying to keep this relatable. And if you knew too much, if you were too high up in the system, you might not be relatable anymore. So it's good that we got you at a good point here. Josiah has some really big dreams, some really big aspirations that I think are awesome, and I really cannot wait to see where he goes. But staying in the present for a bit, first thing I want to talk about is money is backed, firstly, by mostly gold. If you go way back in history, we started with, first idea was we're going to find ways to barter. So you're grabbing, like, I have a pig and I need this from, I don't know, let's say there's a carpenter. I have a pig. I need whatever from the carpenter. So I will go to the carpenter and I'll trade him that pig for whatever I need. And if it's something bigger, maybe two pigs, whatever. that's how bartering started. And then we started with coins, and then people started shaving off the edges of coins to make their own money, and people were like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So then we came up with this brilliant idea. Tell me a little bit about paper money. What makes that? We see it and it's just paper. It's got some numbers on it. It's got a face. Why does that work? How does that have value?
Well, you mentioned the barter system, and the barter system works great. But as soon as you start to develop technologically to where one person needs something, but they don't have anything that the other person needs in order to trade, it starts to get really clunky because you have to have middlemen trading goods. So, when this problem first started coming up, as soon as colonies and things started getting larger, there was obviously a problem. So they came up with a paper that represents what it essentially represents is work. So if you do work for somebody, they give you a piece of paper that represents work. By itself, it doesn't really have any value on its own, obviously, the piece of paper.
Right.
But that is what money represents. It's a piece of labor that you've put in or that you've earned somehow that represents, it's a store of value of labor. So that's at the very essence of it, that's what paper money is.
And if you take, which everything you said is kind of, if you want to take like a deeper dive, you could go ahead and you could actually read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And it's a trip. It's definitely a long journey. But at the same time, you learn so much about why we do things the way we do. And one thing that you hit on that I think is very, very important is money means work. That's its essence. And not just that, but what you're gaining is you're gaining it hopefully because you earned it. And that'll lead into some bigger problems later when you have people that aren't working for their money. Money means a lot less to someone who earns it without working than by working. But money as an idea is not a bad thing. Money as an idea is not
and money and paper money is useful because it
Right.
not only allows you to take out the middleman and just have your labor in a spendable form, but you can also store that up. Otherwise, how would you store your labor if you were just working for someone for food? You'd have
Right.
to work every day just as a subsistence existence. But now with
So-
paper money, it's a store of value, it's a measure of value, and you can keep your labor to use in the future.
Right, exactly. You're saving the good things that you did. You're saving that for later. I think that's super essential, and I think that's a big part of the American spirit, the American economy. Why is it so good? Well, because as a good system of government, you're going to be able to work hard and make money. Work hard and make your dreams come true. And that's a really big point. But now we have to kind of talk about something that's a little more negative. So, can you give me, kind of summed up, a history of inflation? As far as I know, we're looking at the idea of gold backs up paper money, and then so if I have a pound of gold, that means this much. If I print money that's not backed by that gold, then that money literally just becomes paper. So what's the history of inflation? How long has it been going on?
So inflation, it's been going on for a long time. So you hit on the right idea there with inflation. Inflation is unbacked currency in an economy. So you want a really technical definition. It's the unbacked increase of the amount of currency in circulation in an economy. So if you have a piece of money, a unit of money, and you just print another one, if you just had $1 before that represented this much, now you put another dollar into the economy, both of them are worth half what they were before, because you can't increase what you're basing it on if you're just printing more. So that's what causes inflation. It's that unbacked value. Now, governments and such, they get away with it because they can get ahead of the curve. So they can print more money and it will be valuable for a little while, but the economy follows slowly along behind. And that's where you get this steady march of inflation that's caused by the government. Now, there are other variations of inflation that are going to happen regardless, because if you think about it, you can also define inflation as the increase of the economy's value as well.
Mm-hmm.
So GDP, GNP, all that kind of thing will factor into it. But the unbacked currency in an economy that gets inflated by the government is usually what people are referring to.
Right. And nobody likes that because, well, your government is printing basically useless money. And that makes the costs rise in virtually everything because now I have to have more money to have the same value I had a long time ago. That's why I always, when I'm reading like an old biography, I like to see, okay, this person was, what was their worth in that at that time? And then I'll translate that into today's money, and it's always just a mind-blowing statistic. If you take someone that lived in the early 1900s, you take what they were worth at the time, like I did this with Andrew Carnegie, and now you grab what they're worth now, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And that's the scary part to me about inflation is how can you be okay with your government doing that? And how would that affect us today in the I guess what I'm trying to say is, so this has been affecting us for a very long time. Currency was more in the 1800s than it was in the 1900s, so on, 1900s to 2000s. But when would you say was in the history of America, what was the worst moment of inflation ever? And I mean, like, not what was the point where the dollar, I guess, was worth the least amount, but when was the most money being printed?
To the best of my knowledge, during the wars is when the United States printed a lot of money. And of course, when they came off the gold standard, you immediately have unlocked that door
Right,
to open
right,
up
exactly.
a lot of inflationary measures that the government can take. Now, what a lot of the public is afraid of is hyperinflation, and that's another subject entirely. That hyperinflation is a category of inflation, and we all know the story of post-war Germany. We know the story of Venezuela that just happened recently, where hyperinflation sets in because your economy is weak and the government overprints, and then eventually your economy becomes useless. Inflation rates are in triple digits, sometimes quadruple digits, and you have to reset your economy. So people get really scared of inflation because of hyperinflation.
Right.
And that's one of the big fears because of the government intervening. So it gets worse whenever the government steps in and decides to do something, hence the war situation, or when there's dictators in an economy that step in and try to take control and do things with the economy that the economy isn't meant to do. So that's when inflation gets really bad. In the United States, from what I have seen, and I'm again not claiming to be an expert, but during the wars, those economic policies that were put in place, you think of FDR
Right.
putting in his New Deal and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that causes those economic policies that he puts in place use inflationary measures. So he's not necessarily inflating the economy every single day, just printing lots and lots of money, but it's the economic policies underneath that are causing inflation to happen. Inflation as a phenomenon is usually caused by something else. It doesn't just happen. So if you have a healthy economy, your inflation is going to be very slow because the economy is building up value. Inflation happens naturally. When the government steps in, you get the danger of hyperinflation. That's what people are afraid of.
Right. And if you watch, just like if a war's announced or the president announces putting a lot of money into something, which will require probably the printing of more money, if you watch the stocks, you'll see them go crazy. It's people like inflation, and now I gotta skedaddle. This is not good for me. My money's getting worse less and less, and it's a kind of a scary idea. I cannot imagine living during a world war and being an investor and just trying to like get a grasp of where my money's at, because I would
Right.
literally have no clue where my money's at, not just in value, but literally in what am I investing and how is this going to hurt me? And I guess that's the one of the biggest fears about inflation is it's my money. I'm putting it into things I want to, but it could lose value anyhow just because of what, I don't know, the government does. And I don't think it's kind of a scary idea to me.
Yeah, if you think about investing is a big part of inflation for an economy. Because like you said, your investment is going to be based on how much confidence you have in an economy. So I would divide this into three different categories. You have an economy that's deflating,
Mm-hmm.
which when you talk about inflation, and I discussed this in my paper, you can't complain about inflation too much until you look at deflation, because deflation tends to be worse. And I can get into some of the effects of deflation. But if your economy is steadily growing a little bit of inflation, reasonable amounts of inflation, that's normal, and that's actually good, because when investors come and they spend their money, they know that the assets they're putting their money into are going to keep growing in value.
Right, exactly.
They're not afraid of the economy shrinking necessarily. Now, if there's a government that's hyperinflating because of terrible economic policies, they're going to lose a lot of investors fast, because the economy isn't sound along with the inflation. So if you have a solid economy with reasonable rates of inflation, that's what investors are going to like. As soon as the economic policies become unreasonable in places like Venezuela, outside investors aren't going to have confidence in that economy.
Right.
And they're going to pull out, which just escalates the problem exponentially.
Yeah, because lots of power to a country comes from its investors. That's where you're getting confidence, and you're going to gain investors when someone who's choosing to invest sees that many people are investing in your country, and they're like, well, that means that country's doing very well. That means that many people trust that country, so I'll invest. But when they watch people drawing away, that's when you're going to start losing more investors, or I guess you could say hypothetical investors that would have put money into you, and now you're not getting that. And so I guess this brings me to another idea. How can we make inflation better as a people? What can we do? Is there a part we can play in making inflation better?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we keep coming back to this. Inflation is sort of a symptom and not the disease. So as an average citizen and as a voter, you need to be educated and you need to be aware of economic policies, because it's the economic decisions that our leaders are making that are going to cause the inflation. So you need to make sure that you are aware of who you're voting for and what they stand for and what kind of economic decisions they're going to make, because inflation is not this, it's not the disease, it's one of the symptoms of a deeper disease. So if you want to root out inflation and the danger of hyperinflation and excessive inflation levels that we've seen recently that caused the rising prices and the difficulty in the cost of living, because the wages aren't catching up fast enough, then you need to go back to the source. You need to go back to the economic policies. So as the average voter, I would encourage you to stay educated, to stay on top of the news, to read up on the issues, and to understand inflation, to understand the symptoms that are going to come from the different economic decisions. Because sometimes you have an economic decision that's going to be painful in the short run, but it's going to pay dividends in the long run. A lot of times the politicians, though, are going to market the decisions that are going to look good in the short run, but then they're going to be bad in the long run. So if you're an educated voter, you can stay ahead of the rhetoric, you can stay ahead of the propaganda, and you can identify the disease, and you can vote for the right person who's going to make the right economic decisions. So that's the best encouragement for the average citizen. Stay informed and stay educated.
Know who you're voting for, and I guess that's where some people are gonna get mad if you don't vote. Well, then you're kind of just handing it to, if the wrong person wins and you didn't vote, well, you kind of handed it to them. You didn't do your part as a citizen. So before you vote, make sure you know who you're voting for. Lots of times we're always just gonna be like, if there's two choices, there's one on the left, there's one on the right, I'm just gonna choose the one that's on my side. And most of the time that'll probably work out, but it pays off to be well informed, to know what you're doing, to know who you're voting for, because that is a super important thing. So realizing who it is that you're voting for is a big piece to play, and that's.
And I would encourage everyone to pay attention to the local elections as well, because sometimes we think only the big names up top are going to make economic decisions. But especially when it comes to your local community, the way the budget is set up, the way taxes are taken, all of that starts at the grassroots level too. So it doesn't just matter whether you're voting for, right or left, and president and senator and House of Representatives, but it also matters when you're talking about city council, school board, all that kind of stuff is also extremely important, because those decisions come from the grassroots level and work their way up. As a voter, you have a lot more power than you think.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, you got to look small as well as big and stay as informed as possible.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's America, really. That's what America is handing the power to the people. You're going to choose who makes decisions for you, and well, if you, especially if you take a president, if you choose the wrong person, you're paying those consequences for the next 4 years. I read a really great statement once that said, voting is free, but you pay for it for the next 4 years. And if you make a bad decision, you're going to be paying those wages for 4 years, and who knows, maybe even longer if a second term is voted in. But a next thing, this is kind of along the same idea, but this is something I wanted to specifically ask you out of curiosity, because you're an interesting guy. You have big ideas. You want to go places, and one major thing for me is, what can a single person, just one solitary person, do to improve inflation? We're taking out the votership. What can one person do? Not as a country, but just a singular person. What can they do to improve inflation? And what are good choices to make for themselves financially?
So when we think about what one person specifically can do, outside of voting, you want to think about what you're doing with your own finances, what kind of decisions you're making as far as your own investments. You can influence inflation through those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So making informed investments in assets that are going to be worth something for a while, investing in the parts of the economy that are going to boost its value and its efficiency. Again, not claiming to be an expert, but that information that you have to be an informed person making financial decisions, investing period, not just saving up your money, because we can talk about how inflation eats away at slow growing bank accounts too.
Right.
But if you're putting your money into assets that are growing faster than inflation, then you can get ahead of the curve as well. And if you're an informed person, you can keep yourself the trouble of inflation. There's actually a study that I read about that was talking about, it was written from a perspective I didn't necessarily agree with, but it was talking about how disadvantaged people in poorer situations, less educated people, are getting hurt by inflation. And it was kind of a politicized
Right.
article, but it was an interesting thought process, because I realized that these people are getting hurt more by inflation, maybe not because they are less fortunate or less educated, but that they don't understand inflation, so they can't possibly be prepared for it. If you are prepared for it and you understand it, then it won't hurt you in the long run. You can ride the curve of inflation. You can get ahead of it. You can make informed decisions for yourself. Now, you may not be able to influence the entire country just by managing your own finances well, but that, in conjunction with voting well and understanding the issues, that's going to get you a long way, just knowing what you're talking about and making wise decisions.
And guys, this isn't just there's the political side to it, but there's also personally, your personal finance life is huge. If you are avoiding going into debt, you can have more spending power, and that can be placed in good assets, and that will get you much farther in life than if you're living kind of, I don't know where my money's going to come from. I've got to pay off this debt and this debt and this debt, and I took out this loan. Avoid that at all costs, because not only are you going to be better for it, but many people will be better for it. I'm talking your family, even your country. If you choose to invest in good things, even your country's economy is going to be happier for that. And for me, I'm 16. I'm working a job, and I'm trying to learn how to best manage money. And one of the best ways to learn is through trial and error, but to be able to keep back from that is really big. Now, America has been through the trial and error. It has been through the trial and error so many times. If you just look back at the Great Depression, everyone knows about the Great Depression. Everyone. So that's something we can all look back. We can all be like, okay, that was we were at a super weak point in our country. People were selling cars for like anything you will give me that's not money, I will take that. You go to Germany during its depression, there's a story of a lady who once took a wheelbarrow full of money, full of paper money, into the store, and someone stole the wheelbarrow and left the money because that was worth more than the money. And we cannot get to that situation. We cannot ever get to that point as America. And like Josiah was saying, you have to pay attention to what you're doing as a citizen, especially voting. Stay informed, guys. It's not hard to be informed these days. I mean, I'm literally podcasting. You can literally go find so many podcasts all about this stuff. You can find news articles. If you just go on AI now, obviously I'm going to prefer a real person over AI, or else my guest would be AI. But you can actually go a reasonably good distance with AI talking about inflation. I mean, I've taken finance courses for school, so it wasn't, but I still enjoyed it. It was still great, but, there was that part to it. But you're never too young to figure out how this works. Never at all. And I'm sure many good financiers would agree with me when I say start young, understand it young, because in the future you're going to look back and you're not going to regret it at all. Now, you might regret it if you grow up and you don't even know how to stay out of debt, which is unfortunately the fact of many people just go into debt immediately. On my own in debt. That's how it is. So it's best to try to avoid that route and try to stick to a good plan. And even as a nation. Now, one last question that I really wanted to get in, because this is a big part of who I am. This is a part of who you are. As a Christian, we look around at everything that's going on. We see our economy isn't the strongest it's ever been, and we get scared. Obviously, even though they are earthly things, we still get scared as to what might happen to us. I mean, I've been trying to convince my parents, like, hey, gold is a really good investment. It doesn't lose its value. So if you ever want to do that, just like it'd be a good time to do that. But as a Christian, what is the best way to get yourself ready for if our economy does something crazy? What's the best example or standard to set for yourself?
Well, if you're looking at an economy that's falling apart, I think relying on your work ethic is going to be important. Now, I don't think that's exactly what you were asking about. I mean,
Right.
If we have no economy anymore and the government just collapses, well, at least we can still do manual labor.
Right.
But the Bible does actually have some interesting discussions on finances, and of course, this was part of my paper being at a Christian college, and you have to dig into these ideas, and sometimes you wonder, like, how does this have anything to do with Scripture? How can I make a biblical application? But there are some interesting things to talk about. I mean, if you think about the passage in Luke 14, where Jesus is talking about a guy who's building a tower, and he has to plan, because if he doesn't finish something that he starts, it's going to be a shame to him. It's going to be
Right.
an embarrassment. Well, you can take a personal application from that. If you are working toward buying something, and you talked about going in debt, you're not going to go in debt and get hopelessly lost in a pile of liabilities, because then you're going to have unfinished projects. You're going to have to declare bankruptcy. It's going to be a shame and an embarrassment to your integrity.
Right.
So you have to plan. You have to think ahead. You have to be smart. Another principle, Matthew 25, the parable of the ruler who goes away on a journey and leaves his money with his stewards. We are stewards of the Lord's money. And in that parable, the servants that were the most faithful were the ones who invested it the most wisely. So the resources that we have, we need to use them wisely. We need to invest them. And then when those returns come back to us, we have to not forget why we invested it in the first place. So we have to give our returns back to who they belong to. We have to use it in a way that honors the Lord.
Right.
So that's another topic that I went into on my paper, talking about how we use our money to invest, and then the returns of that to give it back to the Lord. And then, the thing I ended my biblical application in the paper with Matthew 6, where at the end of the day, we might worry about our finances, we might take all these precautions, but Matthew 6 says, "The morrow shall take thought for the things of itself." So, the trouble of today is enough, so let's trust in the Lord. Let's take all of our precautions, let's live wisely. But at the end of the day, the Lord takes care of us. He provides for our needs.
Right.
Tomorrow is of the Lord, so we don't have to live in fear. Even if our economy is going in the wrong direction, we can trust in His provision. But we take the steps that we can. We stay informed. We invest our funds. We use the returns wisely, but ultimately we live each day in faith, knowing that our needs will be cared for because He cares for us more than the sparrows, and He takes care of them. I mean, you know what passage I'm talking about there too. So yeah, that's what I would leave you with, is to think about those passages and others. There's more that you can go find and look for on your own. And I would encourage you to do that, not just with this topic, but with others as well, to find these biblical applications.
Right. And ultimately, even if you're not a Christian and you're listening or watching, all that is applicable to you, because we take just the Protestant work ethic that made America great, and having Christian principles has never hurt the country, ever. It's only made us greater. And it's not a fact of pride. Oh, I'm a Christian, you're not. Look what happens when I'm around. No, it's just a matter of the fact that, hey, I believe in the God who made the universe, and I'd say that's a pretty good place to be. And in the Bible, that you can look at it as a religious book, which it is, but at the same time, it's got so many great things just for life that'll give you success if you just follow them. I mean, the Bible is proving scientific things before scientists knew them. So if you take the Bible, you hear us talk about finances, hear us talk about the economy, you're not a Christian, it's still good to follow these ideas, because at the end of the day, it works just as well for you as it does for me. Now, I sincerely hope, if you do not know Christ, that you will come to know Him. But before you mess up your life, make sure that you're on the right track, with your soul and with your body, and you can do both of those things at the same time. And I can promise you, if the economy freaks out, if money loses its value, for me, my family, for Josiah, your family, we have a hope. This isn't just me being preachy. This is not me trying to convert every person who doesn't want to. This is me just speaking the truth. I have a hope, and if things go wrong, I'm gonna be fine. I'll be scared, I'll be hurt, but I'll be totally fine. I'll be totally fine. Because what is given to God, He blesses and returns. If you give your best effort, if you give what is good, then you shall receive good. And no, life won't always be easy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying if you do all these right things, you're going to get a massive house and a great car. But I am saying if you do what's right, you're going to be blessed for it. And that's a super important idea. I think it's a good way to wrap this whole episode up, is with the fact that whether you're Christian or not, this is for you. And we still want to be a good example, a good light. But here we are. I'm trying to do my best to get this out. And with people like Josiah, who I can sit down and talk to, but also share that same measure of hope, it's really something else. It's really something else for you who is not saved. It's just something different. You won't get anywhere else. But that is it for today's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed. Josiah, it was awesome talking to you. It's so good seeing you again. It's been so long, living pretty far apart. So, but thank you so much for coming on.
Let me give a shout out to people for this guy too. Elijah's a great guy. If you have a chance to listen to his other stuff, you definitely should. You should subscribe to his podcast and listen to this stuff as it comes out. If there's articles you want him to read, if there's topics you want him to discuss, he'll do research on it and get back to you with the most informed opinion that he can. And I respect him a lot for the diligence that he has and for the desire for truth that he has. And I'll be here helping as much as I can, and I hope to see him do great things and move forward in great ways. So stay tuned for more of these from him, and who knows, maybe I'll come back again sometime.
I appreciate that. I would love you to. That'd be so much fun. And we'll see how the people speak. But like you said, if you guys ever need me to research something, if there's a topic you're interested, the comments are there for a reason. So you might as well put them to good use. That's it for today. Thank you, Josiah. Thank you to those of you who are listening. You know the drill. Subscribe, like, make sure you share. That's a really big, important thing, to start sharing this and letting other people know that this little guy's around. And I will see you all in the next one. Thank you for listening.